Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today we're checking out a 4K and supposedly HDR monitor from LG called the 32UL950. This beast is mostly marketed towards creative professionals, with LG's website talking about how good it is for color grading and other color accurate work, but there's a few features in here as well for gamers, including FreeSync support and multiple gaming modes. Priced at $1,300 or around $1,750 in Australia, the 32UL950 probably won't be attracting too many pure gamers, as that's quite a high price tag to pay for a 32-inch 4K IPS panel with just a 60Hz refresh rate. But the feature set for someone like me that does a lot of content creation as well is pretty impressive. Stuff like 98% DCI-P3 coverage, multiple factory calibrated modes, and Thunderbolt 3 are all features I look for in a professional class monitor, and LG has delivered on all of that here. If you saw my earlier review for the LG 34WK95U, which is their 5K ultra-wide display for creators, a lot of the design will be familiar to you. The front is dominated by the expansive 31.5-inch panel with slimmish bezels around all four sides. Nothing crazy here, just a big display that lets the pixels do the talking. The stand is a silver metal arrangement with curved legs and a simple pillar, so visually it's all quite pleasing and should be suitable for office users. The rear of my monitor was white, again a very simple use of plastic here that gets the job done. What you'll also notice here is a very adjustable stand. We're getting height adjustment with an excellent range of motion, plus tilt and pivot support. This means you can use the 32UL950 as a portrait monitor, which I know is popular with some creators. The collection of ports is found directly on the rear. We have DisplayPort and HDMI, plus two Thunderbolt 3 ports and two USB Type-A ports. The inclusion of two Thunderbolt ports allows for daisy chaining. Only one of them is an input, but this does allow you to hook up, say, two of these monitors with a single cable and get 60 watts of power sent back to your laptop. I love monitors that support USB power delivery, and considering lots of creators rock laptops as their main machine, this is a great addition. On-screen controls are accessible through a directional toggle, although unlike the last creator monitor I reviewed from LG, the 32UL950 does have a few gaming options in here, specifically a toggle for FreeSync, which is disabled by default, and two game-specific modes. Always love to see Adaptive Sync make the cut, but the rest of the game features aren't all that useful. Luckily, there are plenty of other modes and options for adjusting colors, which I feel is the primary use case for this monitor. So let's take a look at color performance, and out of the box it's all very typical for a wide gamut monitor. The default mode is left fully unclamped, so the entire gamut is available, although for sRGB content this means a stretching up to DCI-P3, which results in oversaturation, so it's probably not a mode you'd want to use for standard work or usage. Due to this gamut issue, when testing default performance against sRGB, as we always do, delta E values in our color tests are around that 3.0 mark, so it's not fully accurate. However, I was quite impressed with default grayscale performance. The white point is close to 6500K, as is the overall CCT curve, which leads to a delta E average of 1.4, an excellent result. The gamma curve isn't perfect and needs a bit of tuning, but this is a decent start. Most people buying this monitor probably won't use it in the default mode though, and will stick to one of the 5 specific color modes that are included: sRGB, DCI-P3, EBU, Rec 709, and SMPTE-C. I'll be focusing here on the sRGB and DCI-P3 modes, as they are the most commonly used, although the Rec 709 mode is almost identical to the sRGB mode as well, if that's of interest to you. Unfortunately, the LG 32UL950 suffers from the same issue as its ultra-wide brother, the 34WK95U. The sRGB mode is very poor. This is all down to an incorrect white point of 5500K rather than 6500K, which throws off everything. Grayscale performance becomes so bad the error values literally don't fit on my charts anymore, and this flows into color delta E issues with averages above 4.0. While the gamut is clamped, the mode is not really usable for color accurate work. And this surprises me a bit because the monitor ships with a 6500K white point in its default mode, so it seems bizarre to me that LG felt the need to make any significant changes for the sRGB mode, which uses that very same white point. There is obviously some fundamental issue being made at the factory with this mode, and that's disappointing because it's one of the most important modes available to creators. The issue is compounded by each of the factory color modes locking down most settings, so you can't just go and change the white point using the on-screen menu. Other features are also bizarrely disabled. I'm not sure why you can't enable the uniformity compensation mode or change the response time setting in any of the calibrated modes. Both of these features should be unlocked at the very least. While the sRGB mode sucks, the DCI-P3 mode is excellent. This mode uses the default white point, so we're getting an accurate 6500K, and that results in a grayscale delta E of 1.52 and generally good performance here. When looking at saturation, again, a great result with a delta E average of 1.44 and a similar color checker result of 1.53 rounds out the bunch. It's not perfectly calibrated, but I'd be happy using this sort of mode for color accurate work. So for those that want a wide gamut monitor, this display will provide great accuracy with no tweaks. And with 97% DCI-P3 coverage as measured by myself, this display has the best coverage of that gamut of any monitor I reviewed up to this point. On top of providing 5 color modes out of the box, LG also gives you 2 slots you can use for hardware calibrations. This is achieved through LG's True Color Pro app, which isn't the best and is especially tricky to use with this monitor as it requires a USB-C connection, but it does end up working as advertised. Basically, you hook up the display, hook up a colorimeter or similar calibration device that you own, and then set to work calibrating the display yourself to any of the supported gamuts. The best part of hardware calibration is that the profiles are uploaded to the display and into the provided slots. This means that rather than dealing with PC-side software profiles, which are often ignored by applications, the display itself is doing the heavy lifting and provides accuracy across any app. This is a crucial feature for content creators and something you typically only see with professional class displays like this. With 2 slots available, you can easily create one sRGB profile and one wide gamut profile to suit whatever work you are undertaking. And with the ability to create an sRGB profile, you can basically fix the included sRGB mode. While I suspect a lot of creators will already have calibration hardware on hand if they are serious about color accuracy, unfortunately the hardware to perform these calibrations is sold separately, so fixing the sRGB mode isn't easy or cheap for those beginning their calibration journey with this monitor. The good news is from a performance perspective, calibrating the display using True Color Pro works very well. Grayscale delta E averages were below 1.0 with a great CCT curve, and both saturation and color checker delta E averages were also below 1.0, so performance here is accurate and contrast doesn't drop significantly. While color accuracy tends to be the most important performance metric for creators, there are of course other things to discuss. Brightness is good, topping out at 400 nits in the SDR mode, which is probably going to be way too bright for most users. Contrast is also excellent for an IPS LCD at around 1300 to 1. That's higher than average, and while it is still well below what a VA panel can provide, the far better viewing angles of IPS panels make this technology overall better suited to creators that require accuracy. Uniformity is mediocre, probably the only key area where this monitor disappoints along with the sRGB mode. You can see here plenty of delta E values above 2.0, it's not an awful result, but it's not as tight as I'd like for a pro monitor. Now this monitor does come with a uniformity compensation mode, but because it's inaccessible in any of the color modes or hardware calibrated modes, it's basically useless and I didn't bother testing it. Response times here are pretty typical for a pro grade IPS at a grade to grey average of 8.04 milliseconds using the high overdrive mode, which is the mode used for the color accurate profiles and can't be changed. This puts it in the ballpark of a gaming grade VA panel, so it's not as quick as the best IPS panels going around, but it's decent enough for creative work within the 60Hz refresh window. Input latency is also fairly standard at around 7 milliseconds. None of these results sound all that amazing for gamers, but I think there's a bunch of other reasons why you probably wouldn't want this display for gaming, despite it including features like FreeSync. The primary one is the price tag, which is around the same mark as a gaming grade 4K 144Hz monitor these days, but also the feature set is generally geared more towards professionals. The other key feature of this monitor is HDR, thanks to Display HDR 600 certification, but performance is very similar to the LG 32UL950, so I'd still class this monitor as only a semi-HDR display. In other words, it gets close to providing a decent HDR experience, but ultimately falls short as it lacks a full array local dimming backlight. Looking at the HDR checklist here, we're meeting the brightness and color gamut requirements, but with only edge-lit local dimming, there can be significant haloing around bright objects, and in general, these types of backlights struggle with HDR content. In some cases, having edge-lit dimming actually looks worse than having no dimming at all. For HDR content, we typically want at least a 20,000 to 1 contrast ratio, but ideally over 50,000 to 1. The 32UL950 only manages a 12,900 to 1 single frame ratio in a best case scenario, but normally this will be way lower and much closer to the panel's native 1300 to 1 contrast ratio, as there simply aren't enough local dimming zones. The edge-lit array also struggles with small bright objects, so brightness decreases with smaller window sizes rather than increases like with a good HDR monitor. Sustained brightness only ever reaches 400 nits and actually falls away to 270 nits with a 2% window, so you're not getting good highlight performance. The only time I recorded above 600 nits of brightness was with a full screen flash, which is good enough to pass display HDR 600 certification, but is not ideal for actually viewing HDR content. Like with the 34WK95U, the only way to get true HDR performance with an LCD is to include a full array local dimming backlight, which adds to the cost of the monitor. Given SDR and wide gamut performance is still great from the 32UL950, I think for some buyers it's safe to ignore the HDR capabilities altogether. But if you came here looking for a top-end HDR display, unfortunately this isn't going to be it. Overall, there's lots to like about the LG 32UL950 for content creators and professionals. It's a really wide gamut monitor, it's big and high resolution, so there's lots of screen real estate, it's accurate to DCI-P3 in the provided mode, it supports hardware calibration, the design is nice, it includes Thunderbolt 3 with power delivery and daisy chaining, viewing angles and contrast are excellent for an IPS panel, and it even supports FreeSync. The only real complaints I have are related to middling uniformity and the poor sRGB mode, which really should be calibrated better. I don't think the sRGB mode is too much of an issue for people that require color accuracy, because anyone in that position should be calibrating the display themselves anyway, but it's just a bit of an oversight from LG. HDR performance is also mediocre, but whether this is an issue will depend on what you want to use this monitor for, and to me it succeeds in enough other areas to only make it a minor problem. I guess the questions at the end of the day are, is this package worth $1,300 and is it the best option on the market? If you aren't going to find the professional features useful, there are plenty of great 4K monitors out there for around $500 that you should choose instead. Same advice for gamers, either get a non-professional 4K display for much less cash, or look into a high refresh 4K monitor like the Acer Nitro XV273K for around the $1,000 mark. For professionals, which is the actual target market here, I also think the 32UL950 is a bit hard to recommend. LG has kind of shot themselves in the foot thanks to their very own 32UD99, which offers many of the same features as the 32UL950 for a regular price of $1,000. In fact, it's even better than that, because right now the 32UD99 is on sale for just $700. Unless you really must have, say, Thunderbolt 3 daisy chaining or a slightly wider gamut, the 32UD99 is a much better deal. I think LG were hoping that HDR would be a big selling point here as well, because that could further justify the price difference. But given the performance is only semi-HDR at best, I just don't think it's worth it. If you need HDR for your workflow, I'd spend more and get something with true HDR like the Asus ProArt PA32UC or the Dell UltraSharp UP2718Q. With that said, because the monitor is actually pretty good overall, if the 32UD99 gets discontinued, or if you can find the 32UL950 on sale, or if it's just a really good price in your country, there are still plenty of reasons to get it. That's it for this monitor review. As always, please subscribe for more and give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Consider supporting us on Patreon for some cool perks, and I'll catch you in the next one.